Welcome to episode 5 of the Restoring Integrity to Abyssinian video series. I'm Gilda, and today I will speak about the occurrences that led up to the June 16, 2024 member-called church meeting. In a previous episode, we talked about this particular meeting as a real inflection point because many members had come to understand that there were several deeply concerning bylaws and procedural violations that had occurred throughout the Pulpit Search Committee's selection process. What was worse is that members' questions, our voices, were by and large ignored over the course of 3 member-called meetings held since March 2024. By the time the PSC announced their candidate in April 2024, there was a palpable tension growing amongst the congregation that was born of increased distrust of and frustration with what appeared to be a profoundly flawed process and, upon information and belief, a predetermined candidate. To put a fine point on this, I will read important excerpts concerning the PSC's own internal irregularities from the committee's vice chair's sworn affidavit, excerpted from numbers 48 to 52. Bear with me because this is extensive but very illuminating. Quote, from January 2024 onward, the PSC had many rounds of voting over the course of months, initially on the top 3 candidates and later on the top 2 candidates once the PSC agreed to eliminate the candidate who consistently garnered the least votes. The initial PSC threshold was 2/3, but we never fully reached it for any candidate. The closest we ever got to even a majority vote amongst the remaining candidates was for Reverend Dr. Harkins. As with other parts of this process, there were issues and concerns raised regarding side conversations with candidates, the PSC voting process, and perceived voter suppression, amongst other things. Disagreements led to threatened and actual resignations, and unfortunately, the passage of time resulted in the untimely loss of a dear PSC member, as well as the loss of participation of such member's spouse on the PSC. In or around April 2024, with fewer members and certain members unavailable, a final vote was held, which resulted in the currently appointed pastor receiving a majority of votes of the 21 PSC members who voted. Upon information and belief, it became clear to me that the currently appointed pastor was intimately involved in the PSC search process and how it continued to unfold. When I was made aware that a psychological assessment would not be performed, as had been agreed by the PSC, communicated to the congregation, and contemplated and worked on by PSC members for months, I inquired into the rationale. I was told that due to the continued leaks of information, the candidate had decided to update his congregation regarding the PSC's vote. Thereafter, I sent a communication to the chair suggesting that the PSC should not permit a candidate to drive the process and that the church should not prematurely announce the candidate before the psychological evaluation and vocational assessment had taken place as contemplated for many months. My concerns were not addressed, and the announcement of Reverend Johnson's candidacy was sent to the congregation via email on or about Saturday, April 13, and an Associated Press feature published on or about Monday, April 15, end quote. This is from the PSC Vice Chair sworn affidavit, part of the case file. Even for church leadership who were not on the search committee, the process was very obviously problematic on many levels, particularly regarding violations of governance. I believe in an act of courage and a sense of spiritual accountability to both the church and its members. A deacon relayed their concerns to fellow deacons in a June 9th email, which is also part of our case file. I'll share an excerpt. Quote, this is not about people and personalities. This is about process. Specifically, the process flaws and skullduggery aimed at manipulating congregational choice. Flagrantly violating our bylaws to achieve this is simply out of bounds. The congregation, which anchors this church spiritually and financially, has signaled its protests, concerns, and opposition in numerous ways via meeting requests, emails, phone calls, texts. The religious and ethical component of this church is secured by following our bylaws, not by thumbing our nose at them. The repeated failure to follow the bylaws has made many members feel coerced, not respected. We should not attempt to subject our church to hostile takeover tactics. That is why the congregation has employed the diaconate board to step in and rein in the undeniably rogue actions of bad actors. While not named specifically, it's widely believed that these actors are associated with the PSC, which has been charged to work carefully with the diaconate and the congregation. But we cannot stand by and watch our ethics, principles, and bylaws toppled by unauthorized actions that elevate a single candidate over church morals and church governance. So, this is not the time for silence by church leadership. It is time to speak up and to call out what we're seeing, especially the disenfranchisement of leaders and whistleblowers, end quote. Again, that is a significant email from a member of the church's deacon board to fellow deacons, also in our case file. On Sunday, June 16, 2024, we had a member-called church meeting with the purpose of formally disbanding the search committee and restarting the process to be completely in alignment with the bylaws. We established a quorum with well over 200 members present, despite several church leaders' vocal disagreement in an attempt to stop the meeting from proceeding. As part of the proposed motion, there was also the recommendation to appoint a new search committee and hire a professional search firm to properly oversee the process. The motion was put on the floor and was appropriately seconded. However, chaos erupted with shouting, arguments, and near physical confrontations that resulted in not only the voice vote being inconclusive, but the meeting ending in recess as announced by the chairman of the deacon board. It's very important to note that the June 16, 2024 meeting ended in recess. It was not adjourned. What this means is, according to our church bylaws, which also follows Robert's Rules of Order, Article 5, Section 8, quote, the order of business at all church meetings shall be as follows. Number 7 of that order is unfinished business. Number 8 is new business. What this means is no new business, the meeting for a pastoral election, could take place before unfinished business was discussed and resolved, the June 16th meeting's motion that remained on the floor until this day. Some members addressed this important issue with deacons, but as had been the case throughout this process, those members were ignored and the church leadership pressed forward with the pastoral election, which ultimately garnered the pastoral candidate with the support of approximately 25% of the full congregation. Amidst complaints and concerns about the validity of the membership list voiced by members, dead members received ballots, as well as many current and active members not being allowed to vote, including new members who'd successfully completed new members classes, the vote proceeded. The official election results, released briefly by the church, noted 2,738 members in good standing. Of those 2,738 members, 672 voted yes for the candidate. This means the pastoral candidate received the support of approximately 25% of the full congregation of 2,738. And for anyone who argues that it's normal Baptist polity to not take into account the requirement of a majority of the full congregation for a pastoral vote, please consider this. Senator Raphael Warnock, also pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, said as part of his remarks from Abyssinian's pulpit in September 2024 to not major in the bylaws and minor in the Bible. However, he wrote in his memoir, A Way Out of No Way, about his own election at Ebenezer Baptist Church in 2005, quote, the members, about 2,200 at the time, would get to vote me up or down, and I would need at least 75% of the vote to be elected. Later that Sunday afternoon, I got a call from Senator Leroy Johnson. Reverend Warnock, he said, you've been overwhelmingly confirmed and elected by the congregation to be the 5th pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church. I'd received nearly 90% of the vote, he said, end quote. In addition to receiving an unarguable majority of the full congregation, it seems from this passage that Ebenezer's leadership honored its own bylaws in their process. In another excerpt from his memoir, in which Senator Warnock describes the pastoral search and election process at Baptist churches in general, he writes, quote, Baptist pastors are recommended by a search committee of the church's members and elected by a vote of the full congregation, end quote. Abyssinian's own bylaws, Article 7, Section 1, states clearly, quote, the pastor shall be called by the majority of the members in good standing who are eligible to vote. So here we are. July 17, 2025 is the next court date with oral arguments in this matter. It's quite likely that this case can become a critical historical marker for how bylaws are viewed and to what extent they are required to be adhered to, not just in churches, but in any and all entities that require governing principles in order to operate and exist. 80 Center Street at 9:30 a.m. next Thursday. Until then, stay safe, stay cool, and be blessed. Thanks for watching.